Let's talk about array prototype map. This is one of my favorite array prototype methods as well. Now, first things first, what is our array map? Array map is a method that obviously exists on our arrays prototype, and it was introduced in ECMAScript version 5 and is supported in all modern browsers. Now, an array map allows us to loop over our array and access each individual item, much like a for each. However, instead of it being a one-way street, we can actually have a two-way street in the sense that we can return new values or new types of our values for each item in our array. Any items that we do in fact return will then give us a brand new array. You can think of array map as I want a new array containing new copies or perhaps changes of each array element. You could, for example, use a map to return a specific property from an object, which would result in an array of just those properties in the order that we loop them. Now, before we dive any further, let's have a look at the syntax for array map. So here we can say items.map, and you can see that we have this callback function. It has a value, which is our data structure above. It has a property called ID, name, and price. We also have the index and the array and the ability to change the this argument. So really the syntax looks something like this, where we have our value, the index, and the array, and then we have some kind of function. Now inside this function, it's imperative that we do in fact return something, but we'll come onto that momentarily. We also get the ability to change the this argument. Perhaps the most important piece of learning map is the fact that we have some kind of return value. So once map has finished, we can perform some logic on each array's item inside of here, but we want to return either a slight change to perhaps one of these items, perhaps changing the price, or we could return a new collection entirely, based on a calculation that we make inside of here. Now, a perfect example of demonstrating a map, if I create an array of some numbers, we'll then go .map. I'll just use an X just to demonstrate these for now, but we could say each item we want to multiply by 2. To see these in the console, we need to log out this mapped. So here I'm going to say console.log and then mapped. We can then hit save. You can see that our numbers have all now doubled because we're multiplying them by 2. So when I say you can change perhaps the item, we could update just one property, or because these are numbers, we could do something with them such as multiplying them by 2. It might be that we take all the prices and also multiply them by 2, for example. It's also good to remember that map is quite a common solution to dealing with lots of data structure problems. It allows a value of any type, from primitives all the way through to objects, giving us some great flexibility in our programming. So that's the basics of a map. Let's take a look at a more real-world scenario where we've been tasked with mapping an array of objects. So what we'll do is we'll just comment these out, and we're going to use a more real-world example here. Let's assume that we've just applied a coupon, which applies a half off of our fries. What we might want to do is map over our collection to receive a new copy of our data structure with the updated values, perhaps after somebody has entered a coupon code. So at this point, we need to loop through our data and update that specific object price property by applying a half off coupon. So instead of doing something like multiply by 2, we're going to divide by 2, but we're going to make it a bit more tricky by dealing with an array of objects. So underneath our mapped, we're going to create a new constant called half off our fries. We can then say items.map. We just want to talk to that single item, and inside the body of the function, we now need to go ahead and return something. But what do we need to return? Instead of just going ahead and just returning things randomly, let's have a think about our code. Now, what we want to do is essentially look for our jumbo fries, and if we find it, we want to divide the price by 2, which seems simple enough. This is where we can introduce a conditional. We can say if the item's ID equals, Now for this, I'm just going to grab the same ID so that we know that we are dealing with that particular item. And inside, we now want to return a new copy of that object with the price change. Best practices for this involve spreading in the existing object, which is our item, and then we can override things such as our price. So here we're going to take our items.price and simply divide it by 2. If we were to take our half off fries now, and we'll also keep our console log items below so that we can see the difference between the two. So here we're going to hit save and just see something interesting. We'll see undefined and undefined, but we also have our ID of our jumbo fries. And yes, we've successfully divided the price by 2. 199 divided by 2 gives us 99.5. So you may be thinking, well, hang on a minute, there's some undefined values in my array now. So let's take care of those. Thankfully, you can think of this as an else statement. Now, instead of doing something such as an else, we don't actually need to use an else statement because we are using the return keyword, which means that underneath our if, we can essentially provide a safe else statement without actually declaring it, and we can just return each item because we don't care about those items. We just care about that one item that we want to change. So let's hit save, and you can see that we have 2 arrays. We'll open up one, we'll open up the second one, which has a 199, and then our first log has all the items intact, but the second item, our jumbo fries, has that half price. Now, using an array map is called an immutable pattern, as it creates a new array from an existing array. This half off fries has nothing to do with our items. They are 2 completely separate arrays. We're using the spread operator to return a new object instead of mutating an existing one. Both operations do not mutate existing data structured and are considered immutable ways of achieving a state change. The state change being our half off fries now contains the new representation of the data or the state that we can then go ahead and use elsewhere. Now that's almost it for this video. However, I want to show you the imperative way of achieving what we've just done. So we have this constant of half off fries, which returns us a new array. So unfortunately, before the world of array prototype map was introduced, we had to do things the old-fashioned way. For this, we would do something like half off fries equals a new array. Then we'd go into our for loop. We can say let I equals 0, I is less than our item's array length, and we can increment that value and create a constant inside based off of each item's index. Now the same logic kind of applies here, however we do need to in fact specify an else statement because we cannot return inside of a for loop. So here we would say if the item.id equals, and we want to again use the exact same ID, so we want to take that emoji. Now this is exactly how an array map will construct you a brand new array under the hood. So we'll do the easy one first. If it's not the item we're interested in, we're going to take our half off fries and we're going to just push the item straight into it. Underneath that will then give us a nice console log that we can check out momentarily. Now, if we do in fact find the item, we can use our half off fries. Now we want to push again, however, we want to push a new object in like we did before. And you guessed it, we want to spread that item in, update our price, and simply just divide the item.price by 2. Let's hit save and check it out in the console. We can expand this. We have a full price $3.99, number 2 is a $2.99, and hopefully we have a 99.5. So this is the more traditional, the imperative way of achieving an array prototype map. We'll comment this out because we want to be left with just our declarative way of doing things. Now it's important to note actually as a side note that this is still a completely acceptable way of doing things, and it also follows that immutable pattern of pushing items into a new array and taking a copy and just modifying it where we want. It's only the style of how we achieve the solution through an imperative style versus a declarative style where we're telling our JavaScript engine what to do rather than explaining how we achieve it, which is the imperative style. Using things like Array Prototype Map demonstrate how smaller, better practice, easier to read, and far more contained our code is. There's no random variables, everything's contained nicely inside of a pure function scope. So just to recap, we have looked at our data structure, we've looked at maps syntax. You must remember to return implicitly or explicitly with the return statement each value, otherwise you're going to see undefined like we did at the beginning. One thing I like to suggest is not encouraging bad habits by using map instead of a dot for each. Just because it's smaller and you can, doesn't mean you should. We should use the right tool for the right job, or you're going to end up confusing people and perhaps your team members because you're using things incorrectly. We then demonstrated a simple map, we looked at a declarative map, and then finally an imperative style of achieving the exact same thing.